So now we're going to be making the ghost prefabs. So when we hover over each of these columns, it's going to have like an imaginary piece there that shows the player where it's going to be spawning in. So to do that, we're just going to be basically duplicating these two, but we're going to be removing all the stuff we don't need. So here, shift click both of these. So we're going to be removing the rigid body and the box collider. So it's just the piece itself because we don't want it to be having physics and interacting with other pieces. And we're going to be calling this player 1 ghost and player 2 ghost. So back in Visual Studios, we're going to go to the game manager and add a public game object again, but this time it's going to be the player 1 ghost, and same thing. Actually, just going to copy this, make that a 2. Okay, so how it's going to work is we're going to be hovering over the area. So when we hover over a column, we want it to move that piece to that location. But first, after we put these pieces in, we want to actually disable them so then they're invisible. And basically we're just going to be turning it on depending on which player's turn it is. So to do that, we're going to go here. First, we're going to just disable both of them. So player 1 ghost. We're going to be doing this thing called set active. And then here you input if you want it to be true to be turning it on and false to be turning it off. So we're going to say false. And just copy this again for the other one. So now both are false. Now we're going to be making a new function again. I'm going to put it right before select column just to keep it organized, because we're going to be, before you select the column, we're going to be doing the hover function. It's going to be another public void hover column, and the input field is going to be accessing this one. That's why it's public. It's similar to the select column function, but this one's just going to be for when you're hovering over it. This is when you actually click on it. So again, the int column. And we'll just leave it like that for now. So in the input field, we're going to be creating a new void that's going to be called onMouseOver, which is going to be doing our hovering input. So right here, onMouseOver. Oh, I'm just going to take away this private. So there's different ones. There's on mouse down, mouse over. There's just on mouse enter. There's a bunch of different ones, but the difference is this one's when we actually put the mouse down. So when we actually click on the thing, and then this is just when our mouse is hovering over this game object. So now we're just going to say game manager. It's the same thing like this, but instead of selecting column, we're just going to say hover column, and we're just going to input the column. So after we save that, we can go back into the game manager, down here to the hover column. We are going to want to turn on whichever player's piece it is. So we're going to say if player 1 turn. Then we want to turn on the player 1 ghost. So actually I'm just going to copy this again. Player 1 ghost, and then set active true. And we want to move this piece's location to wherever the spawn point is. And that's just going to keep it simple. I'm just going to be putting the hover over the spawn location, so then when you actually click down, it's just going to spawn it right on top of there. So we're going to say player 1 ghost dot transform.position again. Remember, that's just the location of this piece, or the ghost piece. Equals, now we're going to say the spawn location. And for the index of it, we just want it to be the column. Remember this from the few videos ago? So we want it to just be the column of it. Because, yeah, this is just where it's spawning in, so we're just going to hover it over where it's about to spawn. Oh, this needs to be not just the column, we want it to be the position of the column. So now if we save this, oh yeah, and so this is just for player 1, I forgot the player 2. I usually just like copy and pasting this whole thing. So if we just say, change this to an else, and change this to a 2, a 2. Okay, now everything should work. So yeah, save this, go back into Unity. So if we press play now, oh, so yeah, this error, this one actually comes up a lot. I know what the problem is. So it's saying that it's trying to access something that doesn't actually exist. And actually it gives you a hint. It's saying what the error probably is. It says you need to assign the prefab variable to the game manager script. So we just need to go do that real quick. So in game manager it says none and none. That one's lucky. Usually it tells you something else, or usually it's actually a lot of errors too. Usually it'll say like null reference error, something like that. This one's actually helpful, it tells you what the problem is, but there's another one where it just says like it's trying to access something that doesn't exist, and that one's confusing because it doesn't tell you where the problem's coming from. But it's usually just you forgot to assign something in the inspector. So let's see if we clear this and press play again. Okay, it goes away. And see, now the piece is actually hovering on the top. If we click it, yeah, it spawns it. The only thing I forgot to do is disable the piece after you finish your turn. But so far it looks pretty good. So we'll go back into Visual Studios. We want to come down here, and we want to actually disable the piece when we do our turn. So not actually in the cover column. It probably will still work, but I just want to do it right here. Because how this works is on mouse over will go every single frame, on mouse down will only go once, and I don't want it to be disabling the piece like they'll be disabling it like how many frames a second we have, which is like 200 frames a second right now, and that's a bit overkill. So down here, we want to put it after it has to first say that the piece is an available spot. So if the turn's not available, we'll just keep hovering. So right here, we'll just say player 1 ghost. I'll just copy this. Set active false. And this one, obviously false again. The only other thing is that when this row is full, we don't actually want the hover piece to be showing. We want it to just show moves that are available and where the player is going to be going. So we need to put a check right here to make sure that the column isn't full. And there's actually a shortcut to that, because remember, like with the update board state, you only have to update the bottom piece. You go up from the bottom. So the row's only full if the top little I guess spot up here is full. Like if this one isn't full, then you know that this one cannot be full either. And it's only full if this top one's full, or else if it wasn't, it would just fall down, obviously. So up here, we want to do another if. We'll say the board state. We're going to be accessing the column, and for this one, we're going to be doing the top number here. So you can either say height of the board, or you could technically just say like this would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you could say 5 there, but we're gonna keep it in variable so it's more consistent, and say height of the board. The only thing with this is the height of the board is 6, and this only goes up to 5. So we're gonna have to do a -1, just because it starts counting at 0 instead of counting at 1. So we're gonna make it go like this. Then we're going to say if this equals, or we're going to say if this doesn't equal a 0. Oh wait, no, let me think. Yeah, no, if it does equal a 0, then we want it to do all this stuff. Because if it equals a 0, that means that the column's available. So if we just quickly save that and go back in the press play. So it looks like it's working. The only thing that you can see, there's a little bit of an artifact here when I click it. Like they're kind of going through each other, but we'll fix that right after this. But we just need to check out the thing. So yeah, when it gets to the top here, see I'm hovering over it, but it's not actually clicking on it. Like if we fill up this column, it doesn't work, and then it only lets you select an available spot. To fix that problem, we're going to add in another variable. This one's going to be a game object called falling piece. And what this is going to do is whichever piece we just spawned in, it's going to start appearing. It's the one that's going to be falling down this column. So it's going to be assigned to this, and we're just going to be looking at its velocity. So when its velocity, or basically velocity speed if you don't know, so while it's moving, which means it has like a non-zero velocity. While it's moving, it's we don't want it to spawn in a piece, but if it's not moving, that means we can start doing the spawning in piece code. So on the hover part, first we want it so the hover piece doesn't, or the ghost piece doesn't show up if the falling piece is still moving. So we're going to say falling piece dot. So we want to get the component, or we want to access the component of the falling piece's rigid body. So we're going to say get component rigid body, and it looks like that. And you can do it for other things like get component. Like I don't know if transform will work. I think that's weird. But you can do get component box collider. You can do basically any component in Unity, use it like that. And we're gonna want the velocity of it. And we're gonna say if the velocity is equal to, we can't say equal to 0 because it's trying to convert an integer into a vector 3. And it's trying to do a vector 3 because velocity is like position where it's in 3 different directions. So we're gonna have to say vector 3 dot 0 is the easiest way, and then if you hover over the 0, it shows you what it does. It might not show up on your screen or in the video, but it says 0, 0, 0, which just means it's 0. So we're gonna have it like that. So now it only spawns in, or it only shows the hover piece when the velocity is 0. Now down here, when we actually spawn in the piece, we're going to want to say, instead of instantiate, we're going to want to say the falling piece equals instantiated piece. And the only other thing is right when you spawn in the piece, the velocity of it is actually 0 again, so then this thing will trigger for like a frame or two. So we want to just add a bit of downward velocity to the thing, which the player shouldn't notice, but it's just so this thing doesn't trigger at the start and cause like the exact same bug when we're trying to fix it. So we're just gonna say again, falling piece dot get component rigid body and dot velocity. We're gonna say this equals the other way to do vector 3s, or you go like this, you say new vector 3, and then we just need an x, y, and a z in there. So it's gonna be down, which is the y direction, so we're gonna say 0, comma, just give it a little bit of downward velocity. It doesn't have to be a big number. And then this is just showing error because it's saying it one's a float instead of a double, so you just put an F at the end of it to tell it's a float. Which, if you don't know the difference, I think a float just stores less numbers than a double, but they're basically the same thing. Just the length of the data is a bit different. So if we do that, it should be good. We just need to add this part to the other part. So just copy that down. And when you say falling piece, so it works for both players' turns. So the last thing we need to do is actually assign the falling piece to the initial one, because right now this is empty right now until we actually spawn in the piece. But when we hover over something, it actually hasn't spawned in the piece yet, so an error will pop up saying like the piece doesn't exist, and it's trying to get the rigid body component, but this piece doesn't exist. So right here, we're gonna add another thing. So it's gonna be and. This will get a little bit complicated, or it'll look kind of confusing, but I'll try my best to explain it. We're going to say, and the falling piece equals null. Falling piece. So this just means that if the piece does not exist yet, then we still want to execute the code. You have to put this one first, because this tells it that that it doesn't exist, and if it does exist, or sorry, if it doesn't exist and it goes to this code, it'll show an error. If you haven't used C#, this is just the or. This is saying or, and that's saying and. And then there's parentheses around this because we want to say if it either doesn't exist, which is just the case for the first object, or if the velocity is 0. So if we save this and go back into Unity and press play, so it spawns in the piece, and as you can tell, when my mouse is still over it, but it's not actually spawning in a piece. The other thing, it's still letting you double click, but just the hover piece is disabled. So let's go quickly fix it so it only spawns in a piece if the other one's not falling too. So that's going to be right over here. We're going to put this in the select column this time. So yeah, the general thing, the select column, we're going to say is mostly like physical things, like the velocity of it, and then this is mostly going to be based on the spawning of the piece and like the actual game state, or the based on the board state. So we're going to say if, and we're basically just going to copy all of this code here. Just copy it in. And then we can put this stuff in there. Yeah, now everything should work. So if we go back again, yeah, now I'm trying to double click, but it won't actually spawn it in. So yeah, so everything looks good. Now let's see, if I go to the top again, yeah, the hover piece still works. Yeah, and if I go to the top here, yeah, it still won't let me spawn it over that piece. So that is it for this video. The next one we're going to be doing is the wind detection, and we're going to do like a diagonal line, or vertical line, whichever direction is for whichever piece one. But again, this game's starting to become more functional, and right now I don't think there's any major bugs, so you could like play it with your friend right now if you want to. You have to find a friend though. I can't do that. Anyways, that's the end for this episode. Bye.